Found out some new things. Having done a little bit of research, so I'm just going to share. So this is the public statement of Curtis Weber giving a 3-paragraph analysis of my photograph. And so he does mention, that he is doing a presentation on the Larson daguerreotype at the MHA presentation. Okay, and then he mentions me, Debbie Hatfield, going by Illinois man. If you haven't read it, he mentioned it's just 10 or 10 and a half pages, so he's promoting it. But then he immediately goes into, you will see from the paper that authors do not believe in checking the anatomical viability of any image by superimposing such things as a death mask or skulls on a photo. The skulls were not superimposed, and again, from this last week, I saw a whole presentation. I won't go into that right now, but this is 100% false. Because in the paper, we do a morphological comparison by superimposing the death mask. And they do that. They don't do the sketching that I do. That was just something I came up with. I didn't see it online, although I'm sure people logically decided to do that. It's not like I patented it and said only I can use this. I directly tell people, go ahead and try this. Do it. And he did. That's fine. I didn't initially say I didn't give him at all permission. I gave him no permission to analyze my photo, actually. So it was 5 years ago in February that Andrew E. Hott just thinks so highly of him that he, to use a mass spectrometer or whatever machine that Meg Stout wanted to help me with. So, but it would only if Curtis believed what he did, because Curtis, I think a lot of people put a lot of trust into him. But it's completely, totally, 100% false that they did not superimpose. That is what morphological comparison is, and it is standard. So when I talk to some people, I've been talking to other forensic scientists that aren't friends with Teghan and Maciej. Like they didn't do papers together, but they are also, well trained and are officially. This is their. It is a field, and all these people that go into this field, kind of like when you become a doctor, things change. That's the problem, is things do change. So maybe if you read a book from 1990, they will have found that photoanthropometry has like a high rate. So one thing I will mention, I can't show the video, and I won't say who it was, and I'm just very grateful that they sent that to me, and it was very nice of them. They didn't have to. It was over an hour long, and it was just, we go through these steps, and those were the exact steps in the exact order it went in our paper. But I'm not going to quote it. That's not what this is about. I'm not training or teaching anyone. I'm not trained to do this. That's why I reached out, because even though I'm an artist, I can see things. I wanted someone who was trained and could really say, is this him? And that is Teghan Lucas and Maciej Henneberg. And these other people. Could they maybe disagree on something? Maybe, but their techniques are, they use morphological comparison. These people did too. That's what we used. And in the video, they did state that there are issues with taking a photograph of a skull and trying to, because you can even tell, especially the front photographs of the skull that I think is Joseph's, it's not perfectly straight on. And when I tried to analyze it myself, it's frustrating. I'm like, it's too bad they don't have. Basically, they would have to physically handle them and measure them and have the death mask and measure. I'm not going to try to quote them on that, but things change. Like, facial recognition systems. I thought that they could just throw it into a computer and it would just say 100%. But they found facial recognition systems. This is the only quote I'm going to take from it. And I could be off, but I wrote it down quickly as I was watching it. But it had a 98% false positive matches and 20% correct. right? And so they're very aware of that, right? And the same with photoanthropometry. Is it never used? I wouldn't say that. As I've read and I try to understand these things, but they have all pretty much agreed, not for exclusion purposes, but they use photoanthropometry because if you try to get the measurements of someone's own face, like seen here, I'm just going to keep showing this, but this was this guy taking it at Harrison. The dimensions of his own face, because he starts really, really close, goes farther away. That's 28 millimeter. He said 85 is probably the best. This is close to really normal. And it can get very wide. With some lenses, it's more wide than your face really is, right? So that's why when you look at Silver Peasant's photo, which they were able to get a really good one because the death mask was flat on the wall, they could stand far back and take a photo. You can't do that anymore because it's almost laying flat. Okay, right? And so photoanthropometry, they found like they would find, you know, how Curtis initially was saying in his email, right? Like this exact distance from here to here, because he thinks that he figured out the exact measurements is what initially he told me. And I was like, well, what, can I see the photo of the death mask you're using is what I'd asked. And then I just rejected and told him, I don't want you to analyze it. You said, you told me you're not a forensic scientist. I had already published a video and I took it down the moment I got put in this email with him. I was like, oh no. And I wasn't talking about him in the video, right? And I took the video down. I was just talking about the skulls, and I took any analysis or reference to, I would just pull up photos from the internet. But when I thought that maybe we would use them, maybe they'd be analyzed, but it, just the same reasons are very, very universal. So I just said, I don't want Curtis to analyze it. And he also just didn't believe that there was a photograph of Joseph Smith, but now he thinks the Larson locket is him. So, but as we go down, I do want to touch on something really quick here. He says that he's talking about photos of the skulls, and he's saying Joseph's skull simply does not seem to be able to make the shape of Joseph's Illinois man's cranium or jawline. He keeps dropping off 1840s because I always called it 1840s Illinois man. As the old saying goes, if the bones don't fit, you must acquit. If Debbie or her co-authors have an explanation for each anatomical problem, I would be helpful to hear. So he puts this sketch on here. This is not a photo of the skulls, and so it was done by his friend who's a sculptor. Using the measurements, he created his own drawing, but it makes no sense for his drawing. Why would it perfectly match my photo? It's just a creation from measurements. And so where do these measurements come from? I just want to explain. This is page 40 of In Search of Joseph, where I was reading again about this today. And so they mention there were photograph measurements taken. These photos of the skeleton remains of the martyrs are located in the archives at our LDS church. And so they didn't publish that, but they didn't use them. So they have until this present time been unavailable to the public. These were the photos that Ron Romig had mentioned to me, the photos that could prove invaluable to my research with the masks. Several measurements of the skulls while they were in the mansion house. One of the photos shows a ruler and some size comparison, perhaps evidence of the tool used for the measurements. However, the measurements as recorded offer no precise locations on the skulls. So they didn't, according to, and this is Dr. Van de Graaff, I'll show you more pages from here, who was an anatomist and wrote books on anatomy. And however, the measurements recorded off no precise locations indicate the zones or lines of measurements, the starting and stopping point of each measurement. And then they continue on, I think, on his page. That deficiency, together with extreme difficulty of making accurate calculations of the curves of these skulls. So that's why my opinion, just from reading Curtis's paper, I would say, well, but that's a curved head. It's very clear that they used calipers, I think, when they did the phrenology measurement, because I took tape and measured from there, this specific point that he was really focused on. Curves of these skulls with inflexible wooden instrument render the numbers nearly useless. So they weren't forensic scientists with calipers and all the correct ways of measuring a skull. Okay, now that the bodies of Joseph had been hands. Anyway, so then they just go straight more into everything about that. And so that's why they did not. So there's Dr. Van de Graaff. You see that's on page 50. So if you actually pick up this book, then you will see page after page after page. It's really just Shannon Michael Tracy standing back, taking a ton of photos of all these men together. And so Dr. Van de Graaff talking about on this page how the jaw didn't line up. So when they did their comparison, and this is not a perfect side view, and also when you look at the front, you see that there's a big unnatural indentation that is probably from an injury on this skull. Major injuries like that remodeled, and it didn't break, so it probably was, probably not during the martyrdom, probably not at Carthage on June 27th, 1844. It's probably something that happened before. It was like it looks like the butt of a gun in between his eyes, gashed, and Oh, it's so sad to research these things, you guys. But he says Dr. Van de Graaff pointed out. So he's really describing everything that they're saying and what they found out. What Dr. Niles Harrod of Provo found out, who is an orthodontic surgeon. But he's a maxillofacial surgeon if you look him up. And so a lot of these men that have studied the skulls that have been rejected by Curtis have actually passed away. They're not with us anymore. So I do want to, again, speak in reverence with some of these people. But yeah, so that was, there's not enough evidence to believe that these are reliable measurements at all, but the friend, let me see if it'll pull up and be good enough to read. So when you zoom in here, that's when you'll see D.J. Bodden's reconstruction drawing of Joseph's skull is based on his death mask, and the measurements, because this is not how the photos of the skulls look at all. And this very well, could be expanded a lot more than this, and just, he's got all these specific measurements. So basically, this man has too big of a head. I don't know. But the person that witnessed and looked at the skulls said that they looked massive to him. And so you see how he's saying, well, the skull doesn't fit. When I superimpose this drawing by D.J. Bodden, then you must acquit. So if they don't match. But again, D.J. Bodden and him concluded that the skull buried as Joseph was Joseph that had no facial bones. And then the one buried as Hiram that had part of the maxilla gone, but it wasn't the part that was remotely close to where the bullet hole was. You've got 6 doctors that disagreed with him. And so he's going up against 6 doctors. But that's just how Curtis rolls. He has his opinions, and I can disagree with a doctor. Any of us can. Doctors can be wrong. I went up against a doctor in the hospital, and he was wrong, and I almost died. Right, but I had some medical training at that point, not a lot. And my mom was in the medical field and everything too. So, this is how my sketch turned out when I superimposed it. I didn't adjust the size of the lips or anything. You can just see I ended up putting it purple. That really the shape of the lips. Just the bottom lip was a little less full when superimposed. And this was en masse. And I've done it individual features. So I did several videos where I did it individual. But you see en masse, it works actually really good with this silver piece-net photo, which was probably taken when the skulls were flat, so you could stand really far back, right? But yeah, we all have to get really close. You cannot stand 6 feet back and have your camera flat. Like, you need to be on a ladder because you need to keep that same angle. And I didn't want to ask for permission. I felt ridiculous asking, can I bring a ladder in here and stand over this and possibly risk my life falling onto a glass case? I didn't want to risk my life to do it. So, we know that, photo distortion exists. So that, again, is just a little bit more detailed explanation. I definitely refute everything that Curtis is saying and said. And plausiblephotographjoseph.com is live. If you see any typos, please email me. Although I know a lot of you just don't care about me and don't want my website to look good. But those of you that do and that believe this is him and want this to just help a girl out. I don't work at a university. I'm not a professional with a bunch of coworkers to look over my scholarly work and help proofread it. No, I've just had so much anxiety that I've just wanted this information out there. And has it been taken and used and abused? Yes, it has. And tried to look like they found it. I just don't understand it. I don't want to accuse any specific things. If someone knows that they intentionally did that, they've got guilt on their mind, and that's reward enough. Okay, but information is there to use, right? It's just sometimes when people copy exactly how you, like, what's going on? So it was just, I just said last summer, I was like, what is going on? Like, why is our paper? I just didn't know that there are things I didn't know that someone couldn't tell me. So again, I am sorry to the descendants of Joseph Smith that I did contact. I was upset. And I'm sorry to Curtis that I was upset in saying how I did not think he was qualified. I don't. But I could have said it more nicely, right? And I didn't say any specific names of a family member, and I took that video down because I was just like, it's just a little too intense. But they did tell me that they didn't think a forensic anthropologist could do anything, but I'm not sure what happened, what was happening. I just know there were things I didn't know, and that they don't want people to know. So I don't know anything, right? But to the family, I'm sorry, there were things I did not know. But I did tell, again, I wish I'd not told certain people the names of who I was working with, that I just thought I could just trust, and I just didn't have anything in my mind that could be used against me, or that they would try to contact them. I just shouldn't have done that. So again, I'm sorry to people I worked with. I don't know who all contacted them or what happened, right? But I mean, again, the paper's out here, but then that's what professors, they will get emails from people. They might get a barrage of stuff, but there are more forensic scientists looking at it. So we'll just see what happens, if anything can or will happen. I have no control over that at this point. And so let's just pray, please pray, that things can happen. I mean, people know what they're doing. Can we trust people that know what they're doing? I mean, I know a lot of people have a lot of distrust in the medical community right now, so they just want to, they do tests at home with a mask, and they do squirt bottle with a mask, and a little bit of water went through it. Yeah, because if it didn't, you would die if you wore that mask. It's like, I did my own scientific experiment on this N95 mask, but in reality, actually cloth masks have found that they will protect you from infecting someone else sometimes better than the medical masks. But it's all about perspective. So you just got a lot of politicians screaming that masks just don't work. They don't work. Maybe not in the way that you think that they're trying to tell you. And it's unfortunate that someone in the United States higher up did lie and say that it's not airborne, and they admitted it was a lie and they knew it was airborne. That was the stupidest thing they could have done, right? Although most of the people in Arizona around me don't agree, right? And I've had people almost kill me just because I was still wearing a mask because I was following the rules. Like, just almost get into fights with me. And they're like, what, you're still scared? You're still scared? Like, people are just so emotional and so angry about every little thing. And I looked at this woman and I just said, I'm protecting you from me. Only a hazmat suit would protect me from you, even across the room, if you had COVID. But I had not had my COVID shot yet, so I was following the rules. So it does prevent your spit from traveling into someone else's lungs that is 6 feet away. So if you don't want grandma to die, wear a mask around grandma if you have the sniffles or you don't know what you have, or if your kids have a cold and they want to see grandma, have them wear a mask. And then whenever grandma starts eating, make sure she is more than 25 feet away from the kids when they take their mask off and eat, okay? Summertime, COVID's still here. Let's keep the apostles alive. Let's keep our grandparents. Let's keep our family members of severe asthma alive. Let's just not spread anything anymore. Let's learn common sense. Let's have respect for our prophet, who is a surgeon, who wears masks and knows the studies to make sure that his spit doesn't go inside of your cavity and go into your heart and kill you immediately. Because that's supposed to be a sterile cavity. So he has been wearing masks longer than any of us and more than any of us. He knows what they do, and he also knows the advent of a hazmat suit, which really was the only thing that can protect, and they definitely did not have a whole bunch of those. But more things might come. Maybe let's pray that, our medical community will get more hazmat suits if something comes again, so that they don't lie again about masks. So saying that we don't need them, so then people hold on to that, and then you don't know what to believe. So I understand that people don't know what to believe, but I kind of knew that was a lie from the beginning, because President Nelson, prophet and heart surgeon, was sending boxes of, they said specifically masks on the news at one point, like to China. Like, he knew they needed some masks. So, and just PPE and everything. So, but hey, you can reject what scientists and doctors say, or you can just believe what you think you see and just live in your own reality. We all have different opinions. I'm not calling Curtis stupid. I just wish things had happened how they had. Have a good day.